Hello, nerds and nerdettes. Welcome back to the channel where once again we're doing a new review for you guys on a recently released book, which is none other than Bitterroot by David F. Walker. This is put out by Image, and this is the hardcover omnibus book 1. This is the first time I was reading a lot of this material. There was a lot of interest when I put out a short of the unboxing, so I figured to get the reading so I could pump this out to you guys. But before we get into any of the details of the book, I do want to remind you guys, as always, if you're looking for this book or any other book, to head on over to Organic Price Books. Use the code STAYNERDY during checkout for $2 off your order. You'll help out an amazing company at Organic Price Books, of course, but it will also help out the channel, which I will forever be thankful for. But with that out of the way, we can dive into the details. This book does have a cover price of $59.99 and a page count of 528 pages. This has 15 issues collected and a decent amount of extras. I was very surprised by the extras, but we can really dive a little bit deeper into that stuff once we start the overhead shots, which we'll jump to now. Here we are, Bitterroot, the Omnibus, Book 1. We don't have a whole lot to go over as far as the outside aesthetics. This is on board, so there's no dust jacket or anything like that, but a very beautiful cover. And then we can take a look at the spine, of course, that Book 1. And then on the back is fairly simplistic. But we will dive into the book now, but I am going to be focusing a little bit on the make of the book once we get to somewhat the center of it. But we open up, we do have some beautiful end pages. Let me get rid of that glare for you guys a little bit. Beautiful end pages with some GNU all over it, which is just so awesome. We do have Sergei family, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Correct me down below, because I'm sure I'm completely butchering that. Very glossy pages, if you can't tell with my lighting. And then we do have the table of contents. 15 issues collected, decent amount of material, a lot of extras as well, so it's a real blast. And then we obviously get a introduction by Jason Johnson. Everything about this book is extremely heartfelt, so I 100% implore each and every one of you to read the introductions, read a lot of the extras, because it is so interesting to kind of get a different perspective, a different coverage of just the title of Bitterroot, its impact, and everything like that. And then we do get a beautiful, this is pretty much the same image in the beginning of the book, but covered, and then we get the Singair's family tree. If you don't want any spoilers there, then I recommend just not even viewing that. And then obviously we jump into issue 1. We get a kind of brief breakdown of kind of what the story is going to be about, which is pretty cool. I like when books kind of do that. And then we pick up with the issue. As you can tell, immediately the just joy, love, the compassion feeling through the art and kind of just the contents in general. Such an amazing book. And then we get right into meeting some of the members of the Singair family, which this is Berg, one of my favorite characters. I'm not going to be giving away each and every character, obviously, but because I want to keep things as vague as possible for those of you that haven't read this for the first time. I think it 100% lends beautifully to those that go in blind. So I'm going to be staying away from as much deep story plot points as possible, because I think it benefits going in blind, as I said. But on its ground level, you do have the Singair family, which is essentially a family of monster hunters. They specifically hunt a specific type of monster, which are the GNU, as I already called them. And they essentially are once humans that have been changed due to a deep-rooted and intense hatred. There's a little bit more nuance to it than that, but again, we'll be kind of shying away from that. If you guys can't tell, the art throughout is so stylistic and beautiful. It is a lot of fun. I don't think the art lacks in any capacity. Sometimes during some of the splash panels and even some of the heavily dialogue portions of the book, it can be a little confusing, like which speech bubble you're going to be reading next, or who's doing what during like a splash page sequence of characters fighting, which can be a little bit jarring at times, but still absolutely amazing. I mean, it has so much heart throughout the art itself. But this is the point where we're going to talk a little bit about the book. So that's kind of my only critique with this book in general. But before we dive into the critiques, I do want to talk about one aspect that they did do with the design of the book that I very much enjoyed, which is they obviously have the first standard cover of the issue that you're going to be reading. So this is obviously the cover of issue 7, and then you go into issue 7. And then when you finish issue 7, before you get to the next issue's cover, on the back of that issue, you get a variant, which I think is such a nice touch. Sometimes I think smushing all the variants to the back is just kind of lazy, and you don't even get to really appreciate them. But in this, they're there. You get to see them as you flip, and it is such a great touch. I very much enjoyed that. I found myself kind of analyzing the covers and the variants much more than I ever would. But let's get into the critiques of the book. So if you guys can't tell, we do have, sorry for the ribbon there, we do have sewn binding. I did stretch this book fairly well before diving in, but the binding itself is not great. I did feel like the pages were catching but also loose at the same time, which I don't know if you guys kind of know what I'm referencing there. If you're in the collected editions world, possibly, I'm sure most of us came across a book that kind of fits those depictions, but I felt like I needed to be very gentle, if that makes sense. As far as the binding, you don't get any gutter loss. The book opens absolutely beautifully, almost to the point that you can actually see the sewn binding between the pages, which is a little scary for me personally. I like it to be a little closed up, not as giving, but it is what it is. What I'm kind of trying to say is that the book overall just feels a little bit fragile, so just be careful. Stretch that spine or that binding just to be safe, and just be kind of careful. These are very thick and glossy, if you can't tell from the lighting, pages, so just keep that in mind. But that's really the only critique I have with the book in general. So diving back into the book itself, as you can tell, it just screams that jazz blues kind of feeling in some instances, and then in others covers such a dark, gloomy, and horrible time in history, as well as somewhat making it a plot point. So I do want to emphasize to those watching this that don't necessarily like traumatic events or trauma in general kind of being explored, to definitely dive into this book with some hesitancy, because beneath the ground level, this book deals with some very deep and dark subject matters, and it's I don't want to give it away for those of you that do want to read it, but for those of you that kind of shy away from books like that, I just want to make sure you guys are well aware. But such a great book, so much heart and so much fun. There's so much comedy and serious undertone. I think the way that this entire title is handled is masterfully, because it is very heavy subject material, very heavy kind of origin to the story itself, but it still has comedic relief, it still has hopefulness, it still has soul, it still has just so much life in it, despite it being about such a dark thing. But man, I was already anticipating my reading experience with this book, and it very much overshadowed even my expectations. I cannot believe how much I enjoyed just this book in general, and kind of the story that we were given, and it is just so great. Shout out to Omni Nation, BJ Kicks, and Omar, at near mint condition for really selling me on the book in general. I thought I wasn't going to pick it up because it really went just sold off the shelf so quickly, but somehow I was able to get it. But great book. Here's some of the extras, which like I said already, highly implore you guys to check out. A lot of heart and soul goes into the kind of stories and opinions and just thoughts that are covered within the extras. So definitely read those. They're pretty good stuff. And then obviously, like any other collected editions, you do get some variants in the back, which obviously are absolutely great. I mean, I'm a sucker for art. And then you do get in the back some people that kind of contributed, or I think may have contributed to some of the Kickstarter before this was used in a hardcover. So a lot of good stuff, but such a great book. Can't recommend it enough. So definitely go out and check this out if you haven't already, but we'll head back to the table. Welcome back. So if you guys cannot tell, even though this is my first time diving into this title, I absolutely enjoyed my ride. I'm going to reiterate, as I did during the overhead shots, that this is definitely some heavy material. Even though on its ground level it is a family of monster hunters hunting monsters, there's definitely a deeper and kind of darker undertone 100% being used as kind of the story's plot point. And it does explore some dark kind of historical events as well, and historical time periods. So I do want to remind those of you that maybe didn't hear it during the overhead shots that is definitely something that is covered in this book. So be wary of that if you're not a fan of that stuff. But such a great book, such a interesting way to kind of play with the subject matter that's kind of used throughout the book. I very much enjoyed the creativity to just kind of that thing in general, which I'm obviously being vague to kind of stay away from spoilers and what the deep meaning of the Genu actually are, because I think it's a lot of fun to kind of discover that organically. But art throughout is absolutely amazing. This is written by David F. Walker. I believe he's one of the creators, which I'm not 100% familiar with. I believe I've read a Cyborg title and a Nighthawk title or something like that he's either written or been a part of. But obviously in the indie world, I'm not as familiar with as the big two, so I can't tell you any other titles that he's kind of written that are popping up into my head other than, like I said, Cyborg during, I believe, New 52 or Rebirth, and a Nighthawk title. Both written magnificently. I had no issues with the writing at all. I think the subject or the plot points that are very touchy are handled gracefully. I don't think anybody should be reading this and coming out upset or angry at kind of the way things were handled. I think it was handled beautifully. The art throughout has so much feeling and just love for the material that's being written and drawn. The only point that really the art changes is during a selective issues where you get kind of a origin or a backstory of some of the characters, which they use sub-in artists to kind of come in and show you that it's a different point in time, or you're not in the current time, kind of exploring the past of a lot of characters, which I think is such a great idea, and books do it fairly often, and I am a huge fan of it because it just reminds you as you're reading that you're not following the storyline where you left off. Like, this is completely separate, which I absolutely am 100% appreciative because I'm probably an idiotic reader. Great characters throughout, though. Berg and Ford being two characters that I was a huge fan of and related to, especially Ford, a lot. Especially pertaining to Ford's kind of opinion and the way he kind of reacts to the character of Berg. It was so relatable, especially during Berg's word choices, which is just absolutely hilarious. And there's a decent amount of kind of comedy and comedic themes kind of explored, even though the dark subject matter is very much present throughout the entire book. but it is such a blast. I cannot recommend it enough. This was my first time, and it was super awesome. I believe this does wrap up the story. I think there's only 15 issues out, but this is a book one, so I'm not too sure on that, obviously, because this is my first time reading it, so I don't know if there's a continuation after this point, like Bitterroot 2 or whatever it may be, but it is really good stuff. Definitely worth picking up, especially if you're a fan of indie comics. And yeah, I give it a 9.5 out of 10. Such a blast, so different, so just filled with love and passion, and you really feel it throughout its pages. So definitely check it out. So that does wrap up today's review. I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. Such a interesting and thought-provoking book. I loved reading it and kind of providing the coverage to you guys. I love just books in general like that, so comment down below if you're a fan of thought-provoking titles or ones that may have you think differently, because I'm very interested in that. I feel like I definitely kind of sway towards titles that make me think more than fun titles, but I'm not sure if that's just me or if you guys are a fan of it as well. Also, let me know if you guys read Bitterroot or you're a fan of Bitterroot. I'd love to hear from you guys. Obviously, enjoying this title as much as I did, I'd love to talk about it with a lot of you guys. But such a great book. Definitely check it out. If you aren't a part of the Illuminati, hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this content, hit that bell icon. And if you could do me a favor, hit that thumbs up icon. I would appreciate all three of those. It really goes a long way for the channel. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And of course, stay nerdy.